Are you ready? Now, in our last episode, we counted down from 43 to 16 on ranking Neil Young's albums. Some may say that was an exhausting countdown. I say exhilarating. So here we go. Here's the payoff of this video, the top 15 countdown of Neil Young albums according to Amity Tracks. Let's do it. Hey guys, welcome to Amity Tracks. Here we are, top 15 Neil Young albums. So we are the third video in into our deep dive into Neil Young, right? Usually we say a week, but weeks, I don't know. But I'm hoping to only to be able to wrap this up with one more video after this. Really interesting, I think, diving into the archives project, and then kind of wrap up real quick talking about kind of officially released live albums and comps and look at some bootlegs. Anyway, we can do all that next video. This video is the top 15 Neil Young albums. So if you want to check out 43 through 16, go watch the last video, because that's what that was. Cream of the crop here. let's just get right into it. At number 15, we've got a record that probably his most notorious record in his entire catalog. For years, it was reviled. I think it's seen a resurgence, as some of these interesting records do. Now there's quite a few people that appreciate it. I think it's pretty awesome. And in fact, go all the way back. I think it's the second video we ever put on this channel. The whole premise of the video was albums I love that I'm not supposed to love. Albums that, that I think are underrated, that should be appreciated more. And I featured this. I'm talking Trans, right? From 1982. I think the record that really blew Geffen Records, or David Geffen's, mind. I mentioned this in the previous video. Geffen sued Neil Young in the 80s for making records not characteristic of Neil Young. In other words, suing Neil for not making Neil records. This definitely sounds like nothing in his catalog. What's interesting is it's actually not all what its reputation is. Its reputation is, it's all this, like it's like Devo or Kraftwerk. It's like all electronic. He puts his voice through a vocoder. Is that how you say it? I think vocoder. Which basically makes the lyrics almost indistinct. You can't tell what he's singing, and it basically makes it sound like a robot is singing. Now, the interesting background: his son, one of his sons, has pretty severe cerebral palsy and had trouble communicating. And Neil was like desperately, Neil and his wife, his family was definitely trying to figure out ways to communicate with his son. And so part of putting his voice through this machine that you can't really distinguish the words, he was sort of trying to empathize with how his son, lived his life in this world and all that. So I don't know, it's all interesting. But that aside, some of the other songs on here are from a totally different session, and they're kind of these like breezy, almost sort of yacht rock or something. It's weird, but it's the electronic songs that people always remember, and they're really good. Actually, they're good songs. Computer Age, Transformer Man, Sample and Hold, like those songs hold up. They're actually really good. And he's performed some of those songs in like more acoustic form and all that later, and they're just like solid songs. He was writing good songs here. I think it's cool he does this, this sort of computer version of Mr. Soul, his classic from Buffalo Springfield days. Yeah. Anyway, it's very cool. Very cool. There's nothing like it. Oh, Nils Lofgren's on here, Ben Keith, Bruce Palmer, Ralph Molina, Frank San Pedro, Billy Talbot. So there's all crazy horses on here. It's there's just nothing like it. It's a strange record. Coming in at number 14, the record that really blew Neil up in his 90s comeback, 90s resurgence. Talking about Ragged Glory with Crazy Horse. Now, this was just recently finally re-released on vinyl in one of those sets. I'm kind of waiting for it to be released individually. Um, but until then, I still have the CD. But yeah, I've seen it on vinyl, but it's like over $100 to get it. I'm gonna wait till he puts it out officially again, reissues it basically, and buy it cheaper. But yeah, this was the comeback. This is what sort of everyone remembered how awesome he was, with this. And it's a rockin' Crazy Horse album. It was with this, where he got the nickname into the mid 90s, Godfather of Grunge, and Kurt Cobain and Pearl Jam and all these bands in the early 90s were all like Hail Neil, and it was really this, and it's a great rock record. I mean, Crazy Horse, top of their game here. It's a real memorable, longer songs, like Over and Over, Love to Burn is a great song. Love and Only Love. White Line. So there's a couple songs on here that are kind of older that he sort of revives here. Because White Line dates back from the 70s. Effing Up. It's a fun song. I really like that song. Farmer John, he even covers that old garage classic from the 60s. It's a triumphant return for Crazy Horse. Okay, number 13. He kept it going. After that, and he puts out the live album Weld, which we can discuss in the next episode when we kind of talk about live albums. And then he shifts gears and puts out this stunner, Harvest Moon, which I have at number 13. Harvest Moon, which, very blatantly, very obviously, he kind of views this as a sequel to his classic Harvest, and revisits that sound. Even kind of brings in some of those guys that are still around to play on this. And yeah, again, he came up with a great batch of songs. This was big in the 90s. This Ragged Glory plus this really launched his comeback in the 90s big time. Unknown Legend, beautiful song. From Hank to Hendrix is gorgeous. You and Me, the title track is beautiful. I mean, really beautiful. Natural Beauty is a real nice closer. Yeah, this is just a, you know, Neil in sort of his acoustic singer songwriter mode at his best. All right, number 12. Now this is pretty high. I don't know if you were really paying attention in the last video, you might have noticed there was one record from more recent times, we'll say from the last 20 years, that I hadn't talked about yet. Here it is, all the way up to number 12. I love this record. This is, to me, this is far and away his best record, of this century. The last 23 years or so. Well, really, kind of done with the 90s too, so 30 years. I'm talking about 2010's Linois. Now, this I would love on vinyl. I haven't been able to find this on vinyl at all. Hopefully, as he keeps reissuing his albums on vinyl, this will come out eventually, and I'll get it. I would grab it immediately. But Linois, I think what this stands apart for several reasons. One, he rarely for the last 20 years or so he brought a top notch batch of songs to the sessions. Two, it's got a unique sound. It's mostly him just on a very distorted electric guitar, but with no band. And it's produced by Daniel Lanois, and Lanois adds a lot of his treatments to it, and so it's a really good, eerie. Uh, there's Neil Lanois there in the studio. Uh, Really interesting record, and I think it's awesome. Now, it's not all that electric guitar. There's some acoustic songs on here too. Um, Oh yeah, it's really hard to read the song titles here, but yeah, just Love and War is great. Angry World is great. Peaceful Valley Boulevard is really interesting and kind of a nice. Got some acoustic in there, but some interesting sound treatments in there too. Hitchhiker, this old song he's had since the '70s. Which, when we talk about the archives, we'll talk about one of his lost albums that he's put out is called Hitchhiker. I really like this version of that song. That song is it's a harrowing song. It kind of goes through drug abuse and all kinds of, and it's a great version on here. I highly recommend Illinois. I think it is his best record of the last 30 years. All right, but we got to get to his peak. Everything from here is from the 70s or 60s except one. There's still one out there from the 80s I have not mentioned yet. So watch for that. All right. At number 11, from 1977, I have American Stars and Bars. Stars and Bars. American Stars and Bars. A very interesting record. This was, we started off this whole Neil Young week with or weeks with a review of Chrome Dreams. He had that ready to go, and then he pulled it at the last minute, and then threw this together in its place. He does that a lot. It's weird, but this was an interesting collection of just songs that he had from the previous couple of years that hadn't made it onto records. But it's a, I mean, Neil in the '70s. I mean, it's top notch. I mean, the most famous song on here, of course, is "Like a Hurricane," one of his greatest rockers. That's on here, but there's some other really great songs on here. I like "Hey Babe." I think that's pretty good. Like the Bullet's cool. Star of Bethlehem's beautiful. Linda Ronstadt on that with him. Homegrown is on there. That was a whole album that he pulled. Another one of the archives releases we talked about in that episode. And "Will to Love" is a beautiful 7 minute song. Like, I don't know, this metaphor of a relationship being like salmon swimming up the river to die, and it's real spare, and he does it. You can actually hear the fire crackling, wherever he was recording it, like a fireplace. It's pretty mesmerizing stuff. But it's an interesting hodgepodge. But it's one of those odd kind of collections of extras that you know top notch. Period. Obviously. Well, here we are, top 10. At number 10, I have one that's probably a little high for a lot of people. I've watched other videos, read other rankings. This might be a little high for some. I've always really loved it. And I'm talking about his debut, his solo debut, right after he left Buffalo Springfield, 1969. Neil Young. He definitely doesn't have his confidence. A lot of people talk about how he sounds a little kind of careful and cautious and hesitant on here vocally. Maybe so. I If Buffalo Springfield had continued, this sounds a lot like his Buffalo Springfield contributions. So I think like the Neil Young songs on a fictitious next Buffalo Springfield album, I mean, it would have sounded like these. To me, it sounds very kind of Neil Buffalo Springfieldish. But "Old Laughing Lady" is a great song. Um, "The Loner" is awesome. "I've Been Waiting for You" is one of my all-time favorite Neil Young songs. David Bowie has covered that. Neil has been playing it in recent years again, and it's just a great, for a while forgotten, but now kind of rediscovered by a lot of people, rocker. I love that song, and it's awesome on here. He's got all I can compare it to is it just sounds like this acoustic acid trip. This 9 minutes of the last trip to Tulsa, which just these really strange lyrics and imagery. I even like the kind of the instrumental opener, "The Emperor of Wyoming." Very Buffalo Springfieldish. I like it. I really like it. Number 9, We have the only live album here, but I justified it actually in the previous video when I was introducing everything. In that, this is 1973's "Time Fades Away." Great album cover. It's awesome. Time Fades Away. It is live, but it's all new material. So he's basically just using the live setting instead of the studio to introduce new songs. But it is, it's all new songs. So I'm including "Time Fades Away," and this is where I have it at number 9. It is part of the Ditch trilogy, which you haven't seen the other two yet in the Ditch trilogy. But yeah, it is. This was a notorious tour. This was unavailable for a long time. Neil has finally reissued it. It's kind of one of these sort of hard to find albums because Neil sort of turned his back on it for a long time. Bad juju, bad voodoo, bad memories. It was a tough tour, and but man, it has got this wonderful, ragged uh, quality to it, and real good songs. I like the title track, and "Journey Through the Past" is one of my favorite Neil Young songs. I think is beautiful, and it's on here. It's so spare. It's a beautiful piano ballad on here. "Don't Be Denied" is a great song. I love this record. It is ragged. It's loose. There's mistakes, but man, it's raw, and it's awesome. Number 8. Now, number 8. Some of you guys probably think this is pretty low for this record. In fact, in a lot of people's rankings, this is their number 1 record. Neil Young's my favorite artist, as I have said. I love this record. So just because it's at 8 out of 43 doesn't mean I don't love it. But there are just happen to be 7 records that I love more. But yeah, this is where I do have After the Gold Rush. I know. So many people think this is his best record. It's hard to argue that, just objectively, but and honestly, if someone was like, what's a Neil Young studio album I should buy to get into Neil? I mean, this might be the best one to start with. I mean, this or Harvest, but this has more variety on it, I think. Yeah, it's a stunner. I don't have anything negative to say about it. I love it, but I just love 7 records more. Uh, but it is nice because it really shows a lot of the different sides of Neil, and he's like at the top of his game. What was this? This was 1970 when this came out. It's his 3rd record, and "Tell Me Why," beautiful acoustic number. The title track is one of his standards. "Only Love Can Break Your Heart," that was kind of a hit, really minor. I've never been a big fan of it, but "Southern Man," his scathing take on Southern racism. Leonard Skinner famously responded with "Sweet Home Alabama," right? Uh, "Don't Let It Bring You Down" is one of my all-time favorite Neil Young songs. That is so awesome. I love that song. That's on here. Yeah, I have no complaints about it, but there's other ones I like more. So number 7, another album from the Ditch trilogy. This is "On the Beach." This is another one that was unavailable for a long time, and Neil finally allowed it to be reissued. So it was kind of a collector's item for a while. It's a great record. I mean, obviously, it's dark. It's kind of a dark ride. This was, it was 1974 when this came out. It was, you can feel the fatigue, but in such a wonderful way. Kind of like Rolling Stone's "Sticky Fingers" album is fatigued but beautiful, right? "Walk On" was a great, from what I understand, kind of a response to Crosby, Stills, and Nash. They weren't all getting along. "Revolution Blues" is great, sort of taking on the Charles Manson murders and that whole vibe. "For the Turnstiles," such a great song. There's like banjo in there. It's so cool. I heard him play that live once, and it's so cool. Actually, twice I think I've heard him play that live. But man, that second side, these 3 long, kind of languid, just so weary but awesome songs: "On the Beach," "Motion Pictures," "Ambulance Blues." This just has this great weary vibe to it that is so good. That's another one where I've seen people's rankings where that's like at the top of their list. People love "On the Beach." I do too, obviously. All right, number 6, I have probably like people who are just like, casual fans. This is the one they have, right? This is his biggest record. This is Harvest. One of the quintessential singer-songwriter albums. I mean, it really helped launch that whole singer-songwriter thing, in the 70s. And then Neil quickly left it, to Jackson Brown and James Taylor and all those other guys who did a great job with it. But this is his singer-songwriter album. Has his biggest hit on there, Heart of Gold, Heart of Gold, which is beautiful, right? Old Man, I think, is one of his most beautiful songs. Yeah, it's just great country rock. I even like, some people don't like A Man Needs a Maid. They think, I think it was Jack Nietzsche who did the orchestration on that, but I think it's great. I love the orchestration on there. Got another scathing attack on the South. Alabama is on here. Needle and the Damage Done, of course. One of the great songs from Neil Young, about losing friends to drug abuse and all that. So, yeah, I mean, what do you say? Harvest is probably his most well-known record, and it's the record that casual fans own too. So there you go. But it's great for a reason. All right, number 5 is one I've been listening to a lot recently. Wow, this is great. With Crazy Horse, with the new Crazy Horse, new at the time, Frank Sampedro had just joined, because Danny Whitten had died. And this is Zuma. So great. Start to finish, just brilliant. I mean, I don't need to say this, but from, I don't know, from 8 on, from After the Gold Rush, On the Beach, Harvest, and this, and then the rest of these, they're all 5-star records in my book. So they're all like cream of the crop, obviously. So great. Looking for Love, Don't Cry No Tears, Pardon My Heart. Really good compositions. I even like Stupid Girl. um, Through My Sails. It's a beautiful acoustic closer with Crosby, Stills, and Nash joining in. But the song on here is, of course, Cortez the Killer. Is that maybe the best Neil Young song? I mean, just he plays it at so many of his shows for a reason. Mesmerizing groove and guitar playing from Neil. I've heard so many live versions of that, and I love them all. I mean, whenever he gets into Cortez, it's just magical. Now, being a history guy, I teach history for a living. Uh, it's always bothered me a little bit that the lyrics are not quite historically accurate, but just but they're great lyrics nonetheless. Just these impressionists. He came dancing across the water. These great imagery. Of the conquistador and Cortez. Yeah, Zuma, Zuma, Zuma. All right, number 4. I've talked about a lot on this channel. In fact, we have done a whole episode deep dive into this record. So go watch that if you want to hear me talk about it. So I'll just talk about it briefly here. But yeah, it's the final record in that beach ditch trilogy. Tonight's the Night, of course. I mean, one of the most harrowing records of all time. Recorded in 73, but not released until 75. I mean, what do you say? It's Go watch my deep dive video on this, because not only do I talk about this, I show a lot of uh, like archives releases and bootlegs from around this record, and I think it's a very interesting video. So go watch that video if you want the full story on Tonight's the Night. But here it is. Okay, top 3. Remember, I told you there was one in this batch here, this top 10 that was not in the 70s. Well, here it is. Yeah, I have this high all the way up. At my number 3 slot is 1989's Freedom. I think this is astoundingly great. People look at Ragged Glory as Neil's sort of comeback into the 90s, but it really started with this, which was right before Ragged Glory. This is just an astounding record. I think the songwriting is top notch. Some of the best songs Neil's ever written. It's incredibly recorded. It's got beautiful acoustic numbers. It's got brutal, distorted rock and roll on there, and all things in between. It is just brilliant from start to finish. It's of course bookended by "Rockin' in the Free World." He starts with this great acoustic version, and then ends it with, the better known electric version. That'll be a trick he'll use again, or this is actually later, so this is when he used it again. "Crime in the City" dates back to kind of the Blue Notes days, but it's just a brilliantly the lyrics to "Crime in the City" are so good. Give me a cheeseburger and the latest Rolling Stone. It's so good. "Don't Cry," man. That the distortion on that song. He does this brutal version of "On Broadway," this cover of "On Broadway," which is great. "Too Far Gone," which is this gorgeous song that dates back to the '70s that he finally put on here, which is awesome. "Wrecking Ball" is this beautiful atmospheric piano ballad that just, I heard him do that live, and it was stunning. One of the most memorable concert experiences I've ever had. I saw him. He was touring for, supposedly, for "This Note's for You," but he'd already shifted gears, and it was before this came out. But he played a lot of this album at that show I saw, and it's one of the most memorable concerts I've ever attended. Houston, 1989. It's just incredible. Yeah, I can't say enough about Freedom. Can't say enough about Freedom. But there are two more, a little higher at number. Oh, I should mention this EP El Dorado, which preceded Freedom. So this is an EP. It's got 5 songs, 3 of which made it onto here in slightly different versions. 2 of them, "Cocaine Eyes" and "Heavy Love," are not on here. But this was an EP. It's a really heavy, awesome EP. It was a Japanese only release. Um, but it kind of previewed what this was going to be. So these kind of go together. El Dorado is here. It's not really official in the countdown, but I did want to mention it. But yeah, number 2 is a stunner. 1969's "Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere," his first record with Crazy Horse, the Danny Whitten version of Crazy Horse. Yeah, and has a bunch of songs that are still standards in his set today. This is just, I mean, "Cinnamon Girl," which I still love "Cinnamon Girl." Listen to that. I mentioned this a long time ago, but listen to that guitar solo that he plays in "Cinnamon Girl." It's one note, and all the chords are changing underneath, so it sounds like the guitar solo is kind of moving along, but the solo is actually one note. But it sounds so awesome. "Down by the River" and "Cowgirl in the Sand." I mean, his two definitive, long Crazy Horse songs, which of course he famously wrote both of those in one afternoon when he had about 104 fever, and he was, laid up in bed and delirious, and he writes 2 of his greatest songs. I love the title track. I think that is such a great song too. I mean, this is definitive Neil. It's necessary for any collection, rock collection. I mean, there you go. You know what's left? Been keeping track over last video and this video. What's my number 1 Neil Young record? 1979, "Rust Never Sleeps." This is it, guys. Its companion live album, "Live Rust," I love too. I've talked about that a lot, but it's a live album. But "Rust Never Sleeps." Uh, where to begin? This, I think this is maybe his best batch of songs. I don't know. It's hard to say, but it's an incredible batch of songs. It shows his 2 most famous and prominent musical personalities in their best light. Side 1 is acoustic, stunner set of songs. My Hey Hey, "Out of the Blue," "Thrasher," which is a great song. That's another one I think where he's responding to a lot of critics, including Crosby, Stills, and Nash. "Pocahontas" appears on here. Marlon Brando, Pocahontas, Marlon Brando, and me. I love that line. So great. And then the second side is just brutal rockin' Crazy Horse, Powderfinger, which I think may be his best lyrics of any song. It's an incredible story in like 5 minutes. He packs this Civil War era story on there in there, which is just stunning. Like Robbie Robertson level storytelling there. Um, and then of course, just like he did with Freedom, he brackets. It opens with an acoustic "My Hey Hey" and then closes with this brutal electric version "Hey Hey My," and it's so cool. I even love "Welfare Mothers" and "Sedan Delivery." They're just kind of like banging your head against concrete, rockers. Yeah, this is it. I mean, for me, this is his greatest record. I love it. What's interesting? My my 3, 2, and 1 picks are all at the end of a decade. It seems like he gets really inspired at the close of a decade. Freedom's 1989. Everybody knows this is nowhere is 1969, and Rust Never Sleeps is 1979. It's kind of interesting. He gets pretty inspired at the end of decades. Well, there you go, guys. If you want to tackle it, let's talk Neil Young in the comments. What are your favorites? Maybe give me a top 10, or you can rank them all. Let's talk Neil Young in the comments. Awesome. Hope you've enjoyed the Neil Young videos so far. I'm hoping to do one more where I'm really excited about the next one because I want to tackle the whole archives series and really kind of give you a tour through the archives because there are some, I didn't include archives releases in this countdown, but there are some stuff that probably would be in my top 10 from the archives if I was including archives releases. Really great stuff. So I'm excited about unraveling the archives in the next episode. And then obviously I need to kind of quickly hit, comp. He doesn't have that many comps actually, but quick hit some comps. And his official live albums, which are really important, like non-archive live albums, which are, I want to hit those a little bit. So yeah, still a little bit more Neil to talk about. We're almost there. Well, thanks guys. Please do subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Hit the bell for notifications, like the videos, all that great stuff. And we'll see you next time.